As tensions with the Parthians escalated, Corbulo had been dispatched to the east to take command of the war against the Parthians. Before beginning any rash campaign, Corbulo decided to rebuild the legions under his command so they could once again become an effective fighting force. Corbulo trained his soldiers under the harshest weather conditions imaginable. The exhausting drills were designed to transform these men into a disciplined and efficient army. More than anything else, the fate of Armenia depended upon the readiness of the Roman soldiers. With the establishment of peace in 37 AD, the situation appeared calm on the surface. Yet this was more a reflection of the internal struggles within the two empires than a direct outcome of the negotiations. In 37 AD, the Roman Emperor Tiberius died shortly after concluding peace with the Parthians. His last years had been blighted after narrowly suppressing a coup headed by a trusted friend, the commander of his Praetorian Guard. Many leading Romans fell victim to the purges that followed. The executions and arrests during the final years of Tiberius's reign greatly increased both public dissatisfaction and the emperor's infamy. Unlike Augustus, who had carefully prepared the path for his succession, Tiberius showed little desire to choose an heir. Only in the final years of his life did he symbolically appoint Gaius Caligula to the office of quaestor, perhaps in the hope of providing some legitimacy for the continuation of imperial rule. Despite Tiberius's neglect of the succession question, the transfer of power took place without difficulty. There was tremendous enthusiasm for the accession of Gaius, the son of Germanicus. Yet the paranoid and murderous behavior of the young emperor, combined with his disrespect toward the Senate, quickly led to widespread disappointment. After only 4 years of rule, Gaius Caligula was assassinated in 41 AD. For several hours following the murder of the young emperor, it appeared that the age of emperors had come to an end. Intense debates soon erupted within the Senate over the future of Rome's political system, until the Praetorian Guard proclaimed Claudius, the uncle of the deceased emperor, as the new ruler. The Senate, lacking an independent military force of its own, had little choice but to accept. During the reigns of Gaius Caligula and later Claudius, no major events occurred in the eastern provinces of the empire, with one exception: the removal of Mithridates from the Armenian throne during the reign of Caligula and his restoration under Claudius. The new emperor was far more interested in the conquest of Britain than in the east. He mobilized 4 legions together with auxiliary forces for the invasion of the island. Roughly a century after Julius Caesar's arrival in Britain, the Roman legions succeeded in conquering the island. Claudius held magnificent celebrations in honor of the victory and bestowed upon his young son the title Britannicus. On the other side, the Parthian Empire was passing through difficult times. Following the conclusion of the war with Rome, Artabanus was once again deposed by a group of powerful Parthian landowners, and his son Cinemus ascended the throne in his place. This time, Artabanus sought refuge with Izates bar Monobaz, king of Adiabene. The aging Parthian king, aided by Izates, was preparing for a march toward the capital when, according to Josephus, Cinemus contacted him and declared that he was willing to surrender the throne to his father without resistance. Artabanus's restoration to the throne did not last long. In 38 AD, only a year after the peace with Rome and the death of Emperor Tiberius, he passed away. Amid a period of political turmoil, Artavan succeeded in holding the throne for a considerable time, restoring a fragile stability to the Parthian Empire. However, following his death, the Parthians once again plunged into devastating civil wars. Immediately after Artavan's passing, his two sons, Gotarzes II and Vardanes I, clashed over the throne. Their conflict continued for 7 years, until 45 AD. Eventually, after Vardanes I died while hunting, his brother Gotarzes II secured the kingship for himself. It was not long before a group of Parthian nobles requested that Emperor Claudius send Vonones I's son, Media, to Parthia. Another civil war broke out between Media and Gotarzes II. In a decisive engagement in Adiabene between the forces of the two sides, Gotarzes II succeeded in defeating Media and his supporters. He captured the defeated prince and ordered his ears cut off to prevent any future claims to the throne, and from his perspective, humiliate the Romans who had supported him. In 51 AD, Gotarzes II died, either of natural causes or at the hands of conspiratorial Parthian nobles. He was succeeded by Vonones II, king of Media Atropatene, though his reign was short-lived. Soon after ascending the throne, Vonones II probably died of old age, and his son Vologases I, whose mother was apparently a Greek slave, assumed kingship. The absence of immediate internal threats during the early years of Vologases' reign allowed him to consolidate his position and strengthen the Parthian Empire. The most notable feature of Vologases I's rule was reviving and stabilizing ancient Iranian culture and traditions. His first decree as king was to use the Aramaic script to inscribe the Parthian language on his coins alongside Greek. Evidence also exists of Vologases' devout religious policy. He apparently ordered the compilation and codification of the Avesta, the sacred Zoroastrian text, suggesting the presence of Zoroastrian priests in his administration, whom Vologases likely relied upon to promote and expand Iranian cultural and religious traditions. Among his other significant actions was the construction of the city of Vologases I near the Greek city of Seleucia. The king's goal was to diminish Seleucia's commercial importance and further weaken this Hellenistic hub in Mesopotamia. Vologases' close relationship with the Jews of Mesopotamia should also be understood in this context. He appears to have relied on Jewish communities to counterbalance the Greeks in the region, a policy pursued by his predecessors as well. During his reign, cities such as Merv and Susa abandoned their Greek names and adopted Iranian ones, providing further evidence of his promotion of Iranian traditions. Vologases' cultural policy was not intended to destroy Hellenistic heritage, but likely aligned with his imperial policy of extending Parthian influence westward, particularly in Armenia. He probably sought to link himself to the legacy of the Achaemenids and ancient Persians as a pretext for restoring Armenia to the Persian cultural sphere and reviving the Achaemenid imperial domain. Another objective of this policy may have been to confront the Philhellene and Philo-Roman faction opposed to war with Rome. In doing so, Vologases effectively pursued two strategic goals simultaneously. Alongside his cultural policies, Vologases I strengthened the political and economic foundations of his power by appointing his brother Pacorus as king of Media Atropatene and placing two other Parthian princes as local rulers in Characene and Elymai. He later installed another brother, Tiridates, as king in Armenia. In this way, Vologases quickly consolidated his power. In 52 AD, With unrest breaking out in Armenia, he saw an opportunity to intervene. It appeared that after Mithridates had been restored to the Armenian throne by Emperor Claudius, his nephew, harboring ambitions for the crown, killed his uncle around 51 AD and crowned himself Radamistus in Tigranocerta. Despite Rome's displeasure at this event, the emperor chose not to intervene. However, Julius Palignus, the legate of Cappadocia, marched to Armenia with his forces without authorization from the capital. Apparently, he claimed he intended to restore order, but in reality, he sought to exploit the chaos to plunder the border cities. Misfortune befell Palignus as his troops deserted him, leaving him alone before the Armenians. Palignus was forced to surrender to Radamistus, who received him graciously. The young king hoped to secure Rome's recognition for his legitimacy. He welcomed the Roman governor warmly and presented him with valuable gifts. Palignus also attended Radamistus's coronation, effectively confirming his kingship over Armenia. The events in Armenia were in no way approved by Rome. Therefore, Ummidius Quadratus, the legate of Syria, was ordered to intervene. He sent a legion under Helvidius Priscus to restore order. Priscus succeeded in bringing stability back to Armenia, but he soon received orders to withdraw. Apparently, the emperor did not want a prolonged military presence that might provoke the Parthians. Vologases, newly enthroned as king of the Parthians, closely monitored developments in Armenia. The chaos caused by Radamistus's usurpation offered the Parthians a potential opening to intervene. However, Vologases waited to gauge Rome's reaction. Once he confirmed Rome's reluctance to act, he deemed the timing favorable. He immediately mustered an army and marched toward Armenia. The Armenians, dissatisfied with Radamistus's rule, offered little resistance, allowing the Parthians to capture the important cities of Artaxata and Tigranocerta with ease. Vologases installed his brother Tiridates as king in Armenia. Yet circumstances soon turned against the Parthians. Outbreaks of plague and disease, combined with the harsh winter and food shortages, forced them to withdraw. Vologases intended to return to Armenia after regrouping, but a simultaneous rebellion in Adiabene demanded his attention. At the same time, nomadic groups mentioned in historical sources as the Dahai or Scythians raided the eastern frontiers of the Parthian Empire. These nomadic groups, referred to in the sources as the Dahai and Scythians, were likely the newly established Kushan Empire. The Kushan king probably attacked the Parthian eastern borders to seize key commercial centers in Central Asia. Aware of the precarious situation on the eastern borders, Vologases promptly marched his forces eastward. Between 53 and 54 AD, the Parthian king was engaged in military operations in the eastern territories. Sources provide limited information about this conflict, but it appears that Vologases succeeded in halting the Kushan advance. Upon concluding the eastern campaign, Vologases returned to Mesopotamia to pursue his objectives in Armenia. Fortune favored the king in Armenia. After Radamistus had resumed his reign, he had employed extreme violence to suppress his opponents, prompting the nobility to revolt and expel him. This created a clear opening for Parthian intervention. At the same time, news of Emperor Claudius's death reached the Parthian court. Vologases no longer waited and led his forces into Armenia. Once again, the Parthians met little resistance. Tigranocerta fell swiftly, and Vologases installed his brother Tiridates as king of Armenia. News of Armenia's fall reached Rome in the autumn of the same year. At just 16, Nero had barely ascended to the imperial throne when he was forced to face the Parthian Empire, Rome's most formidable eastern rival. Lacking significant military and political experience, he followed the advice of his counselors. First, the allied eastern kings, Antiochus of Commagene and Agrippa II of Chalcis, were ordered to muster their forces and prepare to counter the Parthians. Gnaeus Domitius Corbulo, a veteran soldier and seasoned military commander, was summoned from Germania to lead Roman forces in the east. The provinces of Cappadocia and Galatia were also assigned to him to carry out the mission of reclaiming Armenia. Fortunately for the Romans, the Parthian Empire was again embroiled in internal conflict, compelling Vologases to recall his forces from Armenia. He was forced to leave his brother Tiridates in Armenia with only the local Armenian troops under his command to face the Romans. Around 54 AD, a figure named Vardanes II, either a son of Vologases or of Vardanes I, rebelled in Seleucia and issued coins in his name. Around the same time, or shortly thereafter, another figure named Sanabar revolted in Merv. It remains unclear whether the Kushans had any involvement in the Merv uprising. In any case, between 55 and 58 AD, Vologases was preoccupied with internal rebellions along both the eastern and western frontiers, leaving him unable to concentrate his forces for a campaign in Armenia. Around 54 to 55 AD, Corbulo entered Cilicia and met with the legate of Syria, Ummidius Quadratus. According to the emperor's orders, Quadratus was to place 2 of his 4 legions under Corbulo's command, but he initially refused. Rivalry and competition among Roman legates for military prestige were nothing new. The tension that arose between the 2 commanders ultimately ended when Corbulo, possessing superior imperium, was obeyed by the legate of Syria. Finally, the 3rd Gallica and 6th Ferrata legions were placed under Corbulo's command. In addition, as ordered by the emperor, levied troops from neighboring provinces were mobilized. Before reaching his headquarters, cohorts and auxiliary cavalry units were instructed to be stationed in Cappadocia. Moreover, Rome's eastern allies in Commagene and Chalcis were required to provide their forces to serve under Corbulo. When Corbulo arrived in Cappadocia, he was deeply dissatisfied with the condition of the legions under his command. The Eastern legions, having not participated in any major campaigns for many years, had become worn out and ineffective. Tacitus notes that some soldiers were so old that they could barely carry weapons. Consequently, despite Armenia being devoid of Parthian forces, Corbulo deemed an immediate campaign unwise. After reviewing the troops, he ordered the discharge of those who were too old or physically unfit for service. Here, we see a familiar image of a senior commander facing a demoralized army and needing to rapidly transform it into an efficient fighting force through strict discipline, a recurring theme in Roman historical accounts. Nevertheless, this does not imply that the forces stationed in Syria in 55 AD did not require intensive training. The soldiers had long been absent from large-scale warfare and naturally needed retraining and rigorous exercises. Having previously seen success in Germania through the training and preparation of his troops, Corbulo applied the same methods once again. He prepared the newly recruited soldiers under harsh conditions, moving them into mountainous terrain to acclimate them to the cold climate of Armenia. Tacitus records that many soldiers suffered from frostbite, and some even lost their lives. Despite this, Corbulo's presence among the troops, lightly clothed and bareheaded, lifted their spirits. He praised their dedication, encouraged the weary, and modeled patience and resilience. Until the legions were fully prepared for operations, Corbulo could not launch a campaign in Armenia. Meanwhile, Vologases remained preoccupied with internal conflicts and could not effectively defend Armenia, which is why Roman envoys were received with a warm welcome at the Parthian court. Vologases agreed to Rome's request to provide a hostage. In fact, by handing over several rebellious Parthian princes, whose uprisings were always possible, he not only reduced the intensity of diplomatic pressure, but also strengthened his own position internally. Negotiations began on a promising note. At this point, neither power was ready for direct confrontation, which explains the friendly tone of the negotiations. However, by 58 AD, after Vologases had suppressed the rebels and Corbulo completed the training of his forces, the tone of negotiations changed. Rome seemed willing to recognize Tiridates as king of Armenia, but Armenia would have to become a Roman client state, with Tiridates receiving his crown from the emperor. Vologases firmly rejected this condition and prepared for military confrontation. The Romans were equally prepared for war. From 55 to 58 AD, Corbulo had conducted intensive training for his troops and constructed a series of forts along the Armenian frontier. He stationed his auxiliary forces in these forts under the command of Pacius Orphetus. Additionally, to reinforce Corbulo's army, another legion, the 4th Scythica, was sent from Germany or Moesia. After half a century of avoidance of direct confrontation between the two powers, the war between the Parthian Empire and Rome officially began again in the spring of 58 AD. The Roman legions, marshaled with exceptional discipline, departed their camps and marched toward Armenia, where the fate of the region would once again be decided on the battlefield. In the next episode, we will cover Corbulo's campaign in Armenia, the battles that occurred there, and the Parthian counterattacks.